Fantasy podcast. The trade deadline is in full swing. We've had a couple of blockbusters, and that no blockbusters actually happen. So the biggest deal that occurs, we're just going to call a blockbuster till it happens. We have it covered over at fantasyalarm.com. Matt and I are teaming up on the MLB trade deadline tracker, so you can see what we think about the deals, as well as the fantasy spin and how it impacts your fantasy team. So Matt Selz at the Salesman, helping with the deadline tracker, the prospect stuff that we're going to talk a little bit about today, as well as people making a lot of left-hand turns. You cover it all and everything in between. So at the Salesman, it's good to be in here in the studio with you for the first time for
today. Yeah, a little inside joke. I had some issues recording earlier. Things are good here. I guess the blockbuster at this trade deadline is that there's not going to be a Shohei Ohtani deal. The Angels are keeping Shohei Ohtani, whether it be for the next 2 months or try to work out a long-term extension for him in a creative way, I guess, because it's not like they've got a lot of money laying around, because they've already paid Trout $400-something million, and Rendon is just beach bumming it on $38 million a year. So who knows? But they're making a playoff push. We saw them make a late night deal that I covered for the trade deadline tracker there. They got Lucas Giolito overnight, and Ronaldo Lopez, who I guess is just an arm now. Like, it is interesting that those two dudes get traded together both times they've been traded.
Yep.
And they went from DC to Chicago in the Adam Eaton deal, and then they now go to SoCal. So pretty interesting.
And here's the thing: Angels are 7-3 in their last 10. Obviously, right now they have a series with Detroit, so they at least that's going to help a little bit. Then they go to Toronto, so that'll be challenging, and then Atlanta. So it's not like they're looking at this of like, all right, we're hot right now. We got a good little run of games here.
Yeah,
because they don't after Detroit.
Their August is rough. Have you seen their August schedule?
Well, I mean, it opens with the Braves, and they go to the Mariners, so they'll probably rack up 20 strikeouts each game.
They have
there.
Like the Reds. I think they have the Phillies. The Giants, I think, are on their schedule in August too. Like, it's spent entirely in the National League, basically.
In August, and their American League ones are not the ones they want. So here's what they have. So yes, you said it right. They got Giolito and Reynaldo Lopez in August, coming off of their being buyers now because they think they have a chance.
Right.
In August, they go Atlanta, versus Seattle, versus San Francisco, at Houston, at the Rangers, versus the Rays, home with the Rays, home with the Reds, at the Mets, at the Phillies.
That's a gauntlet.
That's going to be tough for them. And because
they're playing every division leader in the American League and a couple of the wild card teams. And they're playing some division leaders in the National League as well, between the Reds and Braves. And like,
I understand it. It's one of, and we've talked about it on what seems like multiple podcasts, and we even crapped on the Angels in the off season and everything for it. But at what point, what makes them buyers? You have Ohtani, you have Trout. I understand you have two of the premier talents in the game, but you've had them for years and have only a couple more. You have nothing to show for it. Let's be honest. They have nothing to show for it. There's absolutely nothing there. So like, what makes this team the team to buy? Is it a final like, hey, Shohei, we'd love to keep you, and look, we're making this investment into the team to try to do it? To me, it almost seems like a pitiful attempt to try to keep Shohei beyond the season. Because the way I see it is, if he's going to walk, you've now bought and sold pieces, and now won't have Shohei potentially after this year. So you sold the future and don't have your future.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, I think we've got to give credit to their GM and their ownership to say, let's go for it for 2 months. Don't care about the next 5 years. It is what it is. Let's put the cards on the table now and go for it. And I think we got to give them credit for that. To say, instead of being the woe is me Angels, we're second fiddle in LA, let's go for it. Let's see if we can't make something happen. the other way to look at it is they either have a framework of a deal in place that Shohei would like, or Shohei said, hey, let's see what we can do here. And if I like it, then maybe I stay, because like we all think he wants 600 million. Is it possible that he doesn't want 600 million, that he'll take 300 million and a crap ton of endorsement money? Because he's making more in way more in endorsements than he is in salary on the field. And that translates very well on the West Coast. It translates very well in LA, which is a massive media market with a huge Asian following, right? And he's been able to become what he's become with the Angels. They know him. They like, maybe he's comfy there, right? If he goes somewhere else, they have to learn his routine. They have to set things up for him. So like, maybe there's that. But I do agree that if they don't make the playoffs and they don't keep Ohtani and then they don't keep Giolito because he is a rental, right now, I mean, Edgar Cuero is a good prospect. Sure. He's like just outside my top 100 in my latest update. He might move up a little bit in the next one. But to be honest, Logan O'Hoppy's coming back this year. And Tice could be a catcher or a first baseman. So he's a little bit blocked. So they gave up a guy that's kind of a piece they don't necessarily need, with a weird profile, to be honest. And Kai Bush, he strikes a bunch of dudes out, but he's getting hit way harder at AA than he should for what everybody's raving about him. So are they giving up? I mean, they didn't have much to give up in the first place. So maybe, I don't know. We'll have to see how this plays out. But yes, is there a decent chance they wind up with egg on their face with not making the playoffs and then not keeping Ohtani? Sure. But we don't know what the conversations have been between Ohtani's group of people and the Angels. Maybe there's something in place. Maybe he went to the ownership and said, if we make the playoffs this year, I'll sign for a hometown discount so you can keep things in place. And that, because it turned it like the first reports were they were going to listen but probably not trade him, right? And then the owner came out and said, well, we'll see where we are after the Toronto series. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the Detroit series, they go, no, we're making moves now. We're turning into buyers. Something had to happen behind the scenes.
Yeah. And let me counteract my point a little bit too, just to show that I have awareness and I can see both sides of the spectrum here. But, hindsight's 2020, right?
Correct.
6 months from now, whatever ends up happening with the season, they stink, whatever. Ohtani leaves for another deal. That could happen. Absolutely. But if there's any inkling of hope that you think you can make a run or that he stays, you kind of have to do it, right? I mean, that's the other side. That's the other side of the pillow.
Here's the thing. There's a lot of teams that are great for the long haul in the American League. But how many, if the Angels come in healthy, which all indications are that they could be with Trout and Ohtani healthy and theoretically Rendon, though he doesn't really matter at this point, right? And if you write Lucas Giolito, I mean, you've got a pretty nice top three there, and Sandoval could do anything. That's a pretty decent top four. Like, if the Rays don't add a piece, are we fully convinced that they show up in a playoff series and do what they've done all season? Because after that record start, they're like one game over 500 once the injuries piled up.
Mm-hmm.
We've all talked about the O's needing a starter, right? But even if they get one, are we fully convinced that their youngsters will show up in the postseason for the first time? I don't know.
Yeah.
So, like, once you punch a ticket, you've punched a ticket. Like, anything can happen. We've seen that before, where the 115 win Dodgers or whatever get taken out 3 years in a row, right? Or the Nats, who were dead 50 games into a season, get on a hot streak and Patrick Corbin pitches the month of his life and all of a sudden they're World Series champs, right? So I'm not saying it's likely to happen. They're going to have to leapfrog some people, but they're in
Mhm.
it and they're going for it. So congrats to them.
And then just one last quick little point on this. How much do you think played into it in terms of the GM not wanting to be the person who traded Shohei Ohtani? You know what I mean? Like the story that comes with that and watching. Because I mean, think about it. Like, even though it was a bad trade and Mookie Betts is not on the same level, but we still rip Boston for how like that occurred. And I know it's a little bit apples to oranges. I get it. But you know what I mean? Like going
Yeah.
down as the guy who traded Shohei Ohtani.
I mean, I'm sure there's a little bit
That's
of
all an
that.
ego thing though, but that's all that it really is.
I mean, yeah, and if you watch the 30 for 30 on the 1983 NFL draft, you'll see the Colts GM Ernie Accorsi at the time. It's like, I don't want to go down as the GM who traded John Elway, right? Because they knew that he was the best prospect in that draft, and he didn't want to trade him. So, is there ego? Sure, GMs have a lot of ego. But I'll point out that again, we don't know what happens behind the scenes. Maybe there's something in place, or they're just hoping that buying these 2 months can get them a deal in place because now they have exclusive negotiating rights to try to lock up Ohtani. Or maybe they just hope that the gate receipts from a playoff run add to their budget and
Mhm.
make it more feasible to extend Ohtani. I don't know.
Yep, absolutely. That's all I'm playing. We'll talk a little bit more about the deadline here in just a little bit, but it's the second episode of the week. You know what it is. It's Down on the Farm with Matt Selz and prospects. We're in a little sweet spot for these so-called prospects and everything because we have the MLB draft. So there's the influx. Shortly thereafter, we now got the deadline, and these are the very valuable trade chips. They're people too, but they are trade chips at the deadline here to see if teams can add talent. But before we talk about guys that could potentially be on the move and highlighting your prospect report this week, that's over at fantasyalarm.com. The Giants did bring up Marco Luciano. So, what can fantasy managers expect from him? And is he a must add in, let's say, 10 or 12 team formats?
I would say he's probably a must add at this point. We're all hurting in middle infield. They didn't bring him up for no reason. He's going to get playing time. He's a top 20 prospect. In fact, in my most recent rankings here, I will tell you that I have, um, yeah, Luciano is about the fourth prospect for San Francisco for me. So he's a little lower on my list simply because he got off to a little bit of a slower start at AAA this year, or Double A rather, and then got called up to AAA and then lit it up. Um, but he's going to offer a nice combination of power and speed, and his average is going to be, excuse upon a little hit and miss. Um, it's nothing better than average in my opinion for his hit tool right now. So we're looking at about a 270 average or so. But the power and speed are pretty nice. He's got double plus power. He's got average speed. So we're looking at about a guy who's capable of 30 home runs and 15 to 20 steals in the middle infield. That's not what he's doing this year. He's not going to come up and hit 35 bombs in San Francisco in 2 months. That's not going to happen. I'm saying at his
Ceiling.
best, at his ceiling, he's maybe a 30 home run guy with about 15 to 20 steals, and then who knows what happens with the average.
And then with the deadline being here, I was going to ask if there's any notable prospects have been traded thus far, but we kind of already broke down the deal that or the grouping that went back to Chicago. So let me say this because looking at the newest prospect report over at fantasyalarm.com, which you all should be reading at this point and checking it out on a weekly basis, there are obviously big name prospects in baseball. We've seen some very, very big names dealt in terms of prospect in the prospect realm. Even look at last year, look back at the Soto deal and see the pedigree of the
Yes.
prospects that the Nationals got back. What about at this deadline? I know you highlighted a couple guys that you see could be on the move here at this particular trade deadline, but of some of those guys, who are maybe like the most relevant, or who do you have the most conviction will get dealt? And obviously, like I said, you mentioned some in the prospect report, but feel free to expound on that a bit.
So I put Ronnie Mauricio in there. There's mixed reports as to what exactly the Mets are going to do. I'm hearing some rumors that they're going to trade their rental pieces, but it's going to take an awful lot to deal Verlander and Scherzer, obviously. But then there's a sneaking suspicion of mine that Steve Cohen doesn't want to lay down and die for this season, and that he might look to add if the deal is right. And he's got some pieces. Now, Mark Vientos was in the piece, but he's not technically a prospect anymore, so I took him out. He could be moved. Ronnie Mauricio is a little bit blocked there, right? Because Francisco Lindor is there for like the next decade. And Jeff and they've got some other middle infielders that are locked up for a few more years as well. So I think Ronnie Mauricio, if the Mets are inclined to add a piece, would be the piece move. But the two from the prospect report that I believe are most likely to be moved, one is Jake Eater, left-handed pitcher for Miami, because they are looking to add bats. There's been some talk that they might look to add Tim Anderson from the White Sox. There's some other talks about who else they're looking at. There's rumors that they're linked to the Yankees for Gleyber Torres, which is interesting because apparently they just want second baseman on their team because like everybody's a second baseman. The other guy that I'm really kind of hoping gets moved is Michael Busch, second base outfielder for the Dodgers, because I don't know exactly what he has to do to come up and make the Dodgers at this point, because he's been lighting things up at AAA for the last 170 or so games. His combined slash line in that time, because he played 111 games there last year and 65 games there this year. Okay, so we've got a little more than a full season. At AAA, Michael Busch is slashing 281, 377, 514 with 36 homers, 141 runs, 138 RBI, and 5 steals.
That'll play.
Except, of course, for Dodger Blue, because they called him up for like a split second to cover an injury and then sent him back down. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what it's going to take, because apparently he's blocked in both positions by Mookie Betts, I guess, is what they're thinking, because Betts is just going to go between second and outfield all game. They're just going to play with 8 fielders, and it's going to be Mookie Betts at second and outfield the whole time. So I don't know. I think they could trade him, and it wouldn't even hurt their system, to be honest. He's like their number 2 prospect, and it wouldn't even hurt their system. They have like 25 dudes in my top 400, so I think those are the 2 guys that I think are most likely to move that are notable. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the Reds could do something. They have some interesting guys they could move who are blocked. The Red Sox, I think, are an interesting team to watch now because they're getting healthy. They're playing their best baseball, except for when they ran into a triple play on a pop out to center. Did you see that the other day? Flew out to center field, and
that was the 8-3-5, right?
Yeah, I don't remember who hit it, but it went to center field.
Center first to third.
First, and then they threw it to third.
Yes.
Yeah. Little League World Series doesn't start till August, boys. Let's settle it down here. So the Red Sox are an interesting team to watch. I think the Giants are sneaky. I think they could do a little bit of tweaking because that division is right there and their wild card spots are right there. So we cover a lot of people in there. Obviously, 2 weeks ago I wrote about trade packages for Shohei, which isn't going to happen anymore. So there's that.
Yeah, could see some prospects on the move. And the other thing to kind of note, too, is some of these teams that are sellers, we may get to see some of their prospects come up if they ship off pieces near the end of the season. Maybe they call up. So keep an eye out on the prospect report over at Fantasy Alarm, as well as the rankings. Are you planning on updating them again?
I will after the trade deadline. Okay. Some guys might shift a little bit. We'll have to see who graduates by that point, because I think I already took Eli De La Cruz out because I released it one day before he would have graduated, so I just saved everybody the trouble and took him out.
That's fine.
But I'm sure there'll be some other guys that have graduated, obviously changed teams, and with the change of teams, they might change where they rank, obviously in their system, but then overall. So yeah, I'll have new rankings out.
Cool. Keep an eye out for that after the deadline as well from Matt Selz at the Selzman on Twitter. And Matt, going back to the deadline here, just little segment here, a little fun, a little early winners and losers from the trade deadline. We've only had a handful of deals thus far as we are recording, which is Thursday around noon time Eastern. So from what I've seen in the beginning, let me just tell you this. I think my winner so far at the deadline, it's not even necessarily a team. I really like Tanner Scott the rest of the way in Miami. If AJ Puck is going to continue to suck, bars, Scott's going to get save chances. He is pitching phenomenal right now. I'm going to talk about him a little later in some of his numbers. He hasn't gotten the save chances yet, and the skip there, the manager, and Skip Schumacher. So the big skip, gave Puck a vote of confidence. It's not there right now for Puck. I don't know if he's in his own head. He's all over the place. Tanner Scott is going to get save chances at some point, and Miami brought over Jorge Lopez. I don't think he factors in the ninth inning whatsoever the rest of the way. So for me, it's Tanner Scott. And then I also kind of think, depending on what happens with Shohei, again, hindsight's 2020, I think 29 teams not named the Angels and MLB are winners because now they don't have to give up a heap of prospects for Ohtani and then have to pay him a ton. Again, hindsight's 2020. I could look dumb with that, but if it's going to play out that way, many other teams won, and the biggest winner will be whoever got Ohtani without having to give up prospects. And that could end up being the Angels. So who knows? We'll have to see there. But Matt, kind of on those same lines, I guess I kind of led you in this one. So far, early winner of the deadline.
I think it's the fans of the Angels.
Look at us not even picking teams, player and the fans of the team.
I think it's it's too early to tell if the Angels actually won it. I mean, obviously keeping Ohtani is a pretty good start. Getting some depth pieces. There's rumors they're talking to the Nats about Heimer Candelario because one Nats third baseman wasn't enough. They want a second.
There's a lot of teams. There's a lot of teams sniffing around the Candelario waters.
Yeah, as a Nats fan, I would prefer the Nats just keep him and extend him because he's A, good, B, not going to cost you very much to extend him. And then it doesn't put pressure on guys like Brady House or Yohandre Morales, who you just drafted, or Carter Keyboom to go find his stroke again. Maybe he wants to check further in the Atlantic Ocean. I don't know. I would prefer they just keep him though. But if you get a nice haul for a rental, why not? But the Angels, the fans of the Angels, are winners for me because they get to watch an actual playoff hunt down the stretch with the best player on the planet still on their team, probably the second best player getting healthy. And if they write Lucas Giolito, it could be very fun in LA for the other LA team.
Yes, and unfortunately for the Angels fans, I have the Angels as a loser. I understand banners fly forever. I appreciate that they're going for it, but and again, hindsight's 2020, but this could backfire massively. Like jobs on the line potentially. This could get really bad. It's already gone downhill with Rendon. The Pujols contract was brutal. If Ohtani walks in the offseason, it could be really, really bad. Like,
well, so I saw one tweet. I saw one tweet that said, "This is their window now. These 2 months are their window now, so you go for it. If
I get
you
it.
let Ohtani go or he walks, it's a 5-year project either way, so you may as well go for it with Ohtani." And I respect that.
No, I get it.
And if you happen to re-sign him, then it's not a 5-year project. Then
for sure,
you just have to draft better.
Yep, my pessimism or my pessimistic nature at times is showing here. I'm going to go with the Angels as my early loser. How about for you?
I'm going to go with the Baltimore Orioles.
As of right now, yes.
As of right now, they made the Shintaro Fujinami deal. Okay, just a bullpen depth piece, I guess. You missed out on an easily gettable rental starter that you probably needed, right? You can't tell me that you couldn't have beaten the Edgar Cuero, Kai Bush return for Lucas Giolito from the White Sox. They're not sending you Dylan Cease because they've already shut that talk down. Lance Lynn is the next to go, but does anybody really want Lance Lynn right now? He's not fixable. So now your option is a busted Shane Bieber, right? Or try to go pry somebody else from, or maybe Blake Snell, which is probably going to cost you more than you wanted than Giolito was. So I know they haven't made really a key move yet, but I feel like they're a loser because they missed out on on setting the market for the first one. Now you've just got to outbid everybody who didn't get the first one.
Yep, I think you're right there. And then I'm going to throw one last quick winner before we go to the weekend streamers and a waiver wire preview here heading into the weekend. Noah Syndergaard has thrown 3 innings since June 1 for the Dodgers, and they were at least able to get Ahmed Rosario. I mean, it's great for the Dodgers. I mean, I know Rosario's been bad this season, but Syndergaard wasn't impacting them at all the rest of the way.
So
healthy or not.
So here's what I don't get about Ahmed Rosario. If you actually look at his peripherals from the last 2 years compared to this one, this year's peripherals are basically in the same area. The BABIP is close, WOBA's close, hard hit rate, quality of contact, all basically the same. The walk rate is higher than it was last year. The strikeout rate is lower than it was last year. The only thing that's not and his average is okay. The only thing that's not showing up is power. And now you're going to put him in the NL West where he could hit homers regularly and still give him a starting shortstop job. I think fantasy owners are going to be very happy with Ahmed Rosario down the stretch.
And bury him at the bottom of the order so he gets pitches to hit. Yes.
He's just replacing Miguel Rojas, who's been flipping terrible.
Yep. Rosario is going to be interesting down the stretch.
And I don't understand why that was the deal for that. You couldn't get more than a busted Thor who's owed like $30 million.
Yeah, not good. Not good for theirs. But Matt, let's go ahead and rattle through some weekend streamers and a waiver wire ad. So my streamer Sunday against Pittsburgh, Christopher Sanchez of the Phillies is going to go 4% owned on ESPN, 30% owned on Fantrax. Has a sub-1 ERA on the road this year. I know it's only 10 innings pitched, but he's been pitching very well. And the Pittsburgh Pirates, when facing a lefty, are kind of the same alliteration or the same analogy as used with Carter Kieboom out in the Atlantic Ocean trying to find a swing. Pirates are just flailing in the any of my Pokemon fans out there. They're just the Pirates are flailing in the box like Magikarp against left-handed pitching. I know it's crazy. It's not good.
So. Maybe they should go check one of the other 3 rivers in Pittsburgh because it's apparently not in whatever one they looked at the first time.
Absolutely. So who's your streamer?
I'm going with a guy who just switched teams and leagues and got a better gig. Yanni Chirinos got DFA'd by the Rays and then got picked up by the Braves because, of course, he did. And he's going to start for the Braves on Friday against Milwaukee. He's 17% owned on Fantrax. Look, he's been shaky the last few starts with the Rays, but before that, he was pretty decent. And now he gets a team that's top 9 in strikeout rates since June against righties. Dead last in ISO, so they're not hitting home runs. They are bottom 4 in batting average against righties. And Chirinos is going to get a boatload of run support because the Braves they're like Big Al. They just hit dingers. So it's looking good for Chirinos there. And real quick, my waiver wire ad is going to be Kevin Kiermaier. Starting outfielder for Toronto, hitting 275 with 5 homers and 11 steals. Shouldn't be owned by less than a quarter of people on Fantrax.
And if you need relief pitching help, Tanner Scott is the one that you want. His save opportunities are coming. 37% strikeout rates this season, sub 2.5 ERA. And then in his last 22 innings pitched, not only does he have 10 holds and a 1.01 FIP, but a 34-4 strikeout to walk ratio. So those are your waiver wires. Ads, your streamers. Head over to fantasyalarm.com for the prospect report, the MLB trade deadline tracker, and you can get access to the fantasy football draft guide when you start a free 7-day trial with any subscription, or you can get it for $26.99. Fantasyalarm.com is the place to be for everything that you need. Give Matt a follow on Twitter or on X, whatever we're calling it these days, at the Selz Man. I'm at Colby R. Conway, and we will see you next week with the next edition of the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Baseball Podcast.